I don't want to be resilient. I actually refuse to be resilient. Hello, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about if a PhD is right for you, or are you right for a PhD? So first things first, make sure to subscribe and click that red bell so you get notifications anytime I post. Okay, so let's get into it. So the main two things we're going to talk about today is, are you the kind of person that could get a PhD? And second, do you want to get a PhD? What exactly do you get out of it? So I've linked two articles below that kind of help me think about what kind of characteristics do you need to get a PhD. So we're gonna go through and I'm gonna ask you the questions. Are you this? Are you that? And you can think about it. Make sure to comment down below if the questions were helpful for you thinking about if you should get a PhD. So one of the first questions you should ask yourself before thinking about getting a PhD is, are you curious? So I think this means that when you learned about that subject that you want to get a PhD in your undergrad, when that information was given to you, did you want to go the extra mile and figure out more about what you were talking about? So in terms of science, when you learned about a certain pathway, did you want to go figure out exactly how they figured out the steps of that pathway? Who figured it out? Things like that. So are you curious about those kind of things that you're learning in undergrad? Do they excite you? If not, you probably don't want to pursue a PhD in that subject. Also, if you decide to look into a PhD program, make sure to look into the research that's being done in whatever department you want to go to. Make sure that you're pretty curious about it. Second thing to ask yourself to see if you're suited for a PhD is, are you a self-starter? So this basically means, can you find your own resources to solve a problem that's put in front of you, or do you need more guidance? Can you start something basically by yourself? So a lot of these questions, if you answer no, that doesn't mean you can't get a PhD. That means you need to be really smart about how you get a PhD. So if you're answering no to all of these questions and you're like, damn it, I really wanted to get a PhD and now I'm not going to, don't think like that. You have to just know yourself, so when you get into that situation, you know what you need. If you're not a self-starter, when you get into that lab or that group, you need to ask the person that's in charge of you for a little bit more guidance. And then if you get into a group and you realize you are a self-starter, you like the independence, you like to solve problems on your own, then you can tell the person that's in charge of you, can you kind of back off of me? I'd really like to be more independent. So it's really the answers to these questions. Doesn't matter if it's yes or no. It just matters that you realize what the answer is, and then you tweak however you're going to go through that experience. So personally, when I went to my graduate school, I didn't really think of myself as a self-starter. I like when instructions are put in front of me and I like help. But as I've gone through my grad school career, I realized that I can be a self-starter and I've developed more independence. So a lot of these things too, maybe the answer is no right now, but those things can be developed. Third things to ask yourself is, are you willing to work long hours? So I sort of hate this question because it makes people feel like they're like selling their soul to the devil when they're going into grad school. Like you won't have a personal life anymore and your whole life is going to be your research or whatever you're doing. I think this for me is more, are you willing to work long hours when the work calls for it? So if I go in tomorrow and I only have a few things I need to do, I don't need to stay for 8 hours just to be there for 8 hours. But other days, everything falls in the same day. I have a lot of experiments, I have a lot of things going on, and that's a 12-hour day. But then the day after I work a 12-hour day, I'll work the next day for like 5 hours. I'll take like a half day. So I think it's balancing. Can you work long hours when it calls for it, but also make sure that you don't get burnt out? You should not be working 12 hours every day. You're gonna make mistakes and you're gonna be miserable. Even if you're curious about the research and you're excited, you have to kind of balance the long days with taking half days, taking days off. So the fourth question to ask yourself is, can you work alone? And this one actually really hit home for me because when I came into grad school, I don't think I really thought about Am I going to be mostly independent in my work, or am I going to be working in a group? Are people going to be helping me? Things like that. I kind of just went into grad school and I didn't ask myself these questions. So I'm still glad I went to grad school, but I think asking yourself these questions is really valuable because in my experience, I do work alone a lot. So many days I'll go in and I'll realize like 5 hours in that I haven't even spoken to anyone yet. And some people might think that's sad and they don't want that environment. I personally like to work alone. And then I feel like when I do have interactions with people, they're more valuable and I'm more excited about them. But if you're the kind of person that doesn't like to work alone, then you need to find an environment where teamwork is a big part of it, where multiple people are working on a project, or the project you're working on, you have this someone to give you guidance, someone to give advice. So in my case, I'm doing something kind of outside of what the lab normally does. So I was really independent in this project and I'm still pretty independent. I do like working alone and solving problems on my own because I feel like when I do solve them, it's a bit more rewarding because I've done it on my own. But again, if you're answering this question with, no, I don't want to work alone, then you need to find an environment where you don't necessarily need to work alone. You need to ask people before you join any sort of group, any sort of lab, how much work do you do alone? How alone are you during the day? And then you can kind of tweak your decisions based on what people are answering. But now you know that it's important for you to either work alone or to not work alone and to ask the right questions. The next question is, are you good at time management? I ask myself, am I good at time management right now? After being in my PhD program for 3 years, I'd probably say no, still no. It's something I have to work on constantly. Getting to lab at the right time, at normal times, not getting to lab at noon, which is, I really have to work to not get there super late. Basically, every task I give myself, I need to add on 2 hours more than what I think the task is gonna take to just give myself wiggle room, because often I'll plan a lot of things in a day and then I can't get it done. I'll have my long list of to-dos and then I get done 2 out of 10 and I'm like, obviously I don't know how much time things take. I'm not managing this correctly. So I think my answer to this still, am I good at time management? Not really. I'm still definitely working on it. But the thing is I'm working on it. So a lot of these questions too, you know, the answer is still no for me, but you just have to actively work on those things that you're not great at. I have to work on time management. I have to make a bunch of lists. Now, I'm the kind of person that will take a 1-hour lunch because I like it, because it's fun. And maybe some days that's not the best thing for my time. And other days I need that 1-hour lunch because it helps me reboot and then be really productive before the lunch and after the lunch. So everybody's time management skills look different. Maybe you need a 1-hour walk during the day, so after the walk, you can really get into whatever task you have planned. That's still being good at time management, even if that time is being spent doing something leisurely. And comment down below if you have really good tips for managing your time, or if it's something you also struggle with. So one of the questions in this is actually one of my least favorite questions, kind of one of my least favorite words that's associated with academia and that's associated with grad school. The question is, are you resilient? What is being resilient? Able to withstand, I Googled it, able to withstand or recover quickly from difficult conditions. So that means something really bad happens to you and then quickly you're supposed to be back on your feet and you're supposed to be fine with it. And so many times in academia, I get these emails and get invited to all these talks that are like, how to be resilient in science, how to be a resilient grad student, how to be resilient during COVID. It just annoys me because I don't want to be resilient. I actually refuse to be resilient. Because the definition is saying that when something bad happens, you have to recover quickly from it. And I refuse. When something bad happens, I'm going to take as much time as I need to recover from it. I'm not going to try to do it, okay, I have 10 minutes and then I have to, get back to work. No. That just makes people that are robots and makes people that are mentally ill. You should not be doing that. When something bad happens, and in science, a lot of the times the bad thing that's happening is you get rejected from something you applied for. You don't get the funding that you worked really hard for. You did an experiment that took 12 hours and the results look awful. You know, when I first started grad school, I really tried to be resilient. I tried, I would do a really long experiment, I would get the results, and they looked really bad. And then I would try to just, okay, that hurt, time to get back on the horse. But that's not how, at least my mind works. I now give myself time to mourn the things that go wrong. When I get a result that looks terrible, I give myself time until I'm over it. I don't try to be resilient. I give myself space to be upset about that thing. Truly upset, even if it's an overreaction. I'm like, all right, that sucks. I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna freak out. This sucks so bad. I'm gonna curse. Like, I just feel it all. So when I do an experiment, it feels really bad. At the end, the results look terrible. I'll give myself a whole day. I'll be like, okay, that sucks. I'm not gonna try this again for a whole day. Maybe I won't try it again until next week because that hurt. That result actually hurt. The time I spent doing that is now gone. I'm mourning the time that I spent on that thing, and that's okay. I'll give myself days. And then when I start that thing again, I feel refreshed and I feel ready. So I don't get over things quickly. I let them sink in and I let it hurt. So don't be resilient. So basically throw this question out the door. Are you resilient? Who cares? Are you able to deal with a bad situation in whatever way you need to? So one of the next questions is, can you delay gratification? This is such a good one. This article about this was actually hit some of the ones I didn't even really think about. But truly, this is actually one of the most, I think, really relevant questions for getting a PhD is, can you delay gratification? It's something I have to do constantly. It's constant because in my department, at least, in Vanderbilt, getting a PhD in biological sciences, the average time to graduate in my department is 5.7 years. That's a really long time to be working on something basically every single day. So that should tell you that the results in this field are not quick. They take a really long time. Delaying gratification is really what I think about as being patient with the work that comes with doing a PhD. At the end of every day, you're not going to have a pretty result or a pretty new idea or a new page in your thesis. It's gonna take a really long time. I think the cool thing about knowing that is that you can plan things out for a long time. I start a new experiment and I say, I'm probably not gonna have publishable, good results from this for like 6 months. So that's probably, hopefully, an overestimation, but if it's not, then I've set a reasonable goal for myself. So you don't want to go into your PhD and say, I'm probably going to write this paper in about 4 months from when I start. No, it's probably going to be like 3 or 4 years until you can get something that you can publish, depending on what your work is. So basically the question is, can you be patient? And a lot of times when my gratification is delayed, it feels really shitty. And I had to remind myself to be patient. So I feel like a PhD is a lot of realizing the behavior that you have that's innate to you and trying to tweak it to make it work within the environment of a PhD. I'm not a super patient person. Part of the reason I like social media and Instagram is because it's gratification quickly. I feel like that's the reason a lot of us like it, because it's just, we post a picture, we get likes, it's gratification. It's quick. We don't have to wait for anything. So you have to kind of tweak that learned behavior when you're in a PhD program and learn to be patient, or at least deal with the annoying things that take forever in a way that's not messing with your mental health. Okay, one of the other questions really hits home too. Can you take criticism? So for me, I'm gonna say I really am good at pretending to take criticism in grad school. So when I present or do whatever, and then there's feedback after, and it's not always great feedback, as much as you think that you do things perfectly, as much as I think that I do things perfectly, I do not. So I'm still really working on that. And I honestly think everybody's still really working on that. If you're not working on that and you figured out how to take criticism gracefully, beautifully, without it hurting you in any way, comment down below because I'd love to find out. But yeah, it's really hard for me to take criticism. When you pour hours into something like a presentation that you think looks good and you've done the research and you've practiced, and then you get critiques back, it can kind of hurt. You know, you're separate from whatever you're doing. To some extent, you know, I'm separate from that presentation. That presentation's not me as a person. But when you take that criticism, it almost feels like people are attacking you. So I think the big thing about taking criticism in a healthy way is trying to separate, this is the thing I created and put into the world, and this is me. And people are critiquing this thing that I created and put into the world, but they're not critiquing me as a person. So even though I love this thing I created and I want people to be sweet to it, I think it's easier to take versus people are attacking me as a person. If that's something that you're dealing with, the cool thing about finding mentors in that PhD space is you can tell your mentor that. Asking yourself these questions and answering them is helping you figure out what you need to be successful. And some of these things I've been saying, ask your mentor this, ask your mentor that. Make sure you find mentors that you can ask this stuff. Don't find a mentor that's intimidating and seems like you can't talk to them, because you have needs and they need to fill the needs as much as you need to have them filled. So make sure you're finding mentors that you feel like you can have an open dialogue with, that you can tell them, I'm a little bit sensitive to critiques. And then over time, hopefully you'll get stronger. Or you just get so much criticism in grad school that you'll build tough skin. Even though that's the harder way to do it, sometimes you can't build a space where people will give you nice critiques, gentle critiques, critiques that are actually helpful. Sometimes they just suck, and sometimes you just have to take it. But I think it does make you stronger in the end. But it kind of hurts during the whole process. One of the other really important questions to ask yourself, do you want to contribute to scientific knowledge or to any knowledge in whatever you want to get your PhD in? When I first came into my PhD, I didn't really ask myself that question, do I want to contribute to scientific knowledge? It sounds fancy and fun. That sounds really cool. Yes, I'd like to be a part of scientific knowledge, but the actual process is really time consuming. It takes a long time, takes a lot of critiques, a lot of redoing, a lot of troubleshooting. But I think that only almost makes it more valuable, because after you go through all of that and then you have your name on that paper that you worked on for years and it's finally out in the world with your name on it, I think that's gonna feel really good. Probably 20% because I'm expanding scientific knowledge, and 80% I wanna see my name on a paper because I'm selfish. One of the really main questions here I think is really important is, do you have a good support system? So I'm gonna make a video about getting a PhD and having good mental health, because those two things often do not coexist, unfortunately. But in this video, the main thing to do is ask yourself, do you have a good support system? Even if you go into grad school with 100% mental health, just you're good, you don't have issues, you need to still make sure you have a good support system going into grad school. Do you have a therapist? Do you have friends that you can talk to about this? Do you have a journal? Do you have things that you like that are not getting a PhD? Like going on walks, reading books, drinking a beer in front of the TV. This is also something to look for when you're looking at different programs. What kind of mental health resources do those universities have? Because it's important and you're probably going to need it. It's not a sign of weakness. A lot of people need mental health resources when they're in grad school. It's actually pretty normal, and I do it. I know so many people that have therapists, counselors, things like that. And you want to make sure wherever you're going, whatever university you're going to, has those resources for you to use. One of the next ones is, can you pick up skills on your own? So I think this is kind of in the same vein as can you work alone? When I thought of can you work alone, it was more in the actual space where you do work, you're alone. This, I think, is more, can you pick up skills on your own? Can a new problem be presented to you and no one else around you, no one else in your lab or your team or your group knows how to solve the problem, and you kind of have to get that problem solved by yourself using your own skills? Right now, it's kind of hard to answer that. When I first came into grad school, I'd probably say, I don't know, I think, but actually I have to apply that in grad school constantly, figuring out how to do things by myself. And I think that is a key to one of the transferable skills of getting a PhD into other job fields. Is, can you do things on your own? Can you figure out problems on your own? Can you learn a skill by yourself? And if the answer is no right now, it might be when you're thrown into that situation, you actually meet the challenge. The last question to ask yourself is, do you have friends that do not do science? Personally, I have a lot of friends that don't do science. Most of my friends do not do science. And I say this because when you're in your PhD, you're just wrapped up in the science. At least if you're doing, your PhD in science. You're wrapped up in the project and thinking about it. You'll take a shower. You'll be taking a shower and the project comes into your head. You'll be on vacation. The project will come into your head. Any way you try to avoid it, it's still there, which can be a good thing and can also be a bad thing. But if you're around people that also just constantly talk about science, when are you not thinking about science? When are you thinking about things that are not related to your PhD? So that's why you should have friends that have jobs in other fields. That's actually really key. So now we're done with the first part of the video, asking yourself those questions. Do I have those skills to get a PhD? Can I build those skills? Now, the second part of the video is, why should you even want to get a PhD? Why are we even talking about any of this? This article was basically 10 reasons to do a PhD in biology. So we're gonna go through a few and see if they're worth it. One of the first ones is to research something that you are passionate about. And so I definitely think this is valid. I know a lot of people in labs that are just love the research. I'm going to make a video about how to choose a lab. And one of the main things actually is balancing how passionate you are about the research and how happy you are in the environment. And spoiler alert is that you should always choose the environment over the research. That's just my opinion. But if you're depressed, that protein you study is not going to get you through the day. But normal, fun, healthy people that you like can get you through the day. So I think one of the reasons to do a PhD is to research something you're passionate about, but to also remember to keep it in reality. Passion can only get you so far, especially in research, I think. So you need to make sure you're also really happy in your environment. Another reason to do a PhD is to become an expert in a scientific field. And I actually think that this is really valid, but you have to realize that you're becoming an expert in a really niche field. So I study basically 2 different proteins within, metabolism. And so it is sort of niche. And I don't know if I'm gonna get a job studying these proteins again or within the realm of metabolism. But what you do get from a PhD is super transferable skills that also work in basically any job you want to get. You learn project management, you learn really good communication skills, you learn time management, you learn how to deal with adversity but not be resilient. So these are really transferable skills. So yes, you become an expert in your scientific field, but also you get all of these transferable skills to go into whatever field you want to go into. Okay, so one of the ones on the list is also to boost your lifetime earning. So I'll just read off what they said. They said basically a PhD in biology with 1 year experience is about $50,000 salary, which is actually not great for how many years of training you put into a PhD, but can also range to $80,000 per year and reach even six-figure incomes, depending on if you kind of go into industry or other jobs like that. So you actually can end up making a lot. It just takes, you doing your PhD, a lot of training, and a lot of years of not making great money to end up making good money. So it's kind of you're investing in yourself. One of the ones on the list to get a PhD is to have intellectual freedom. I'd say this is 50% true and 50% a complete lie, at least in my experience. Every day I get to go into lab and basically decide what I'm gonna do that day. But also I have to report back to my PI and I have to do what they say most of the time, within reason. So I do have intellectual freedom, but it's often within the confines of what my PI is expecting from me. So I'd say it's 50-50, you have intellectual freedom. But as you work through your career and become more independent, hopefully your intellectual freedom will increase. One of the ones I thought was really interesting, a reason to get a PhD is to work with really smart people. So I will say that's pretty true. Sometimes I'll just sit in a meeting where a lot of smart people are talking about science, and it's actually pretty awesome. Just the way they think about things, the critical thinking, the questions. It's awesome to just be around really smart people. It's humbling for sure, and you learn a lot from them. And third, it can be so toxic. I think any job environment can be really toxic, but sometimes when a lot of smart people get in a room, they just go at each other about the nerdiest shit. Sometimes the passion with which they argue is just so out of proportion to what they're arguing about. But if you have a good sense of humor, it can be kind of funny when two grown men are fighting about the function of this one protein in this one cell type, like they're fighting over a lover. So it can be humbling and awesome. It can also be toxic and silly. Another one is a reason to get a PhD is to be on a campus. I actually really do like working on Vanderbilt's campus. There's students, it's beautiful scenery, there's all these nice facilities like a gym and places to eat and things like that. So I do like the university. I do like the university life. And if that's something that you enjoy and you want to be in that space and in that environment, then getting a PhD, you'll probably be in that environment for 5 to 7 years. This last one is definitely dependent on what you're getting your PhD in. The last reason to get a PhD is that you get paid to get a PhD. When you're in science, so I think physics, biomedical sciences, ecology, things like that, you get paid, you get a stipend to actually study at that university. So if you're getting a master's, you don't get a stipend. I'm not an expert on the whole payment thing. I just know that I do get a stipend for doing my PhD. I don't have to pay the school to be there. So that's actually was one of the defining reasons why I decided to get a PhD. I was not going to pay for more school after my undergraduate for personal financial reasons. I did not want to, but the fact that I could go get a PhD in biomedical sciences and actually get paid as if it were a job, it's a salary, then that was kind of the deciding factor of, okay, I'll go get this PhD. So that can be one of the reasons to do it. If you want to get paid to study and to do research, then you can do a PhD in a science area. That's all I have for now. So there's still a lot to talk about getting your PhD, about grad school, about mental health in grad school. So you definitely want to hit subscribe and hit that red bell so you get notifications every time I post. Make sure to like this video or dislike it if you hate it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.